The teacups were still warm. The lemon and lavender shortbread I had baked the night before sat untouched on the porcelain plate. It was 7 p.m., the exact time Julian usually walked through the door, his architect's portfolio tucked under his arm, a gentle weariness in his eyes that I had learned to soothe with quiet conversation and a shared pot of Earl Grey. But this time, he wouldn't. I stared at the front door for longer than I care to admit, almost expecting to hear the sound of his key turning in the lock. But there was only silence, the kind of silence that settles into the bones when something is gone for good. My name is Alara Hayes, and for 12 years, I believed I had the kind of marriage that was a quiet work of art. Julian was my anchor, a man of thoughtful lines and solid foundations, both in the buildings he designed and in the life we built together. He never raised his voice. He was never late. He brought me wildflowers from the Saturday market and never let me worry about the mortgage on our little house overlooking the harbor in Port Blossom. We didn't have children. Our life was a calm, flowing river, and we were two stones smoothed by the same current, resting side by side. But what I didn't know, what I was about to find out, was that a river can have a powerful, hidden undertow. And it was about to pull me under. Julian died on a Tuesday. A sailing accident, they said. His boat, the Albatross, was found capsized near the old lighthouse. A sudden squall. The Coast Guard's report was clinical, detached. Lost at sea. I nodded as they explained it, as if the meteorology of my grief made any sense. It didn't. Not when you've just lost the only person you thought truly knew the shape of your soul. The funeral was a blur of salt spray and sorrow. A gathering of black coats on the windswept bluff, polite condolences, and unfamiliar faces telling me how brilliant my husband had been. I clung to Maya, my best friend since we'd shared a pottery studio in college, who kept handing me tissues I didn't use and cups of water I couldn't swallow. It wasn't until my sister, Lena, arrived that the air in the room shifted. Her perfume was a little too sweet, her hug a fraction too long. "Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice a smooth, polished stone. Julian was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But something in the way she looked at me wasn't grief. It was something else, something assessing. Later that evening, as she poured herself a generous glass of wine in my kitchen, she said, "Hey, I know it's not the time, but Julian loaned me some money. For the down payment on my condo. I was hoping to get that settled now that, his estate will cover it, right?" I stared at her. "What money?" I asked. She blinked, then gave a little laugh, as if I were being silly. "Oh, I guess he never told you." Something inside me, a fine, trusting thread, began to fray. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through our house, touching the furniture as if for the first time. The shelves of his architecture books, the polished driftwood on the mantelpiece, the framed wedding photo that suddenly felt like a portrait of strangers. That's when I saw them. Julian's keys, still sitting in the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. I picked them up, the metal cool against my palm, and there it was. The one I was never supposed to use. An old, ornate skeleton key, completely different from the modern keys to our house and cars. The key to his archive. I had asked about it once, years ago. He'd just rented a small studio in the city's old quarter. "It's just a place to store my old models and blueprints, love," he'd said with an easy smile. Dusty, cramped. "You'd hate it." I didn't press. I never pressed. That was our marriage. Easy, comfortable, and full of quiet spaces I wasn't meant to enter. But now he was gone. And I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I drove to the old quarter. The studio was on a cobblestone lane behind a row of historic buildings with faded brick facades and window boxes spilling over with geraniums. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect a man like Julian to keep anything messy. He came here once a week, every Tuesday. Like clockwork. I never questioned it. The heavy oak door was painted a deep sea green. The key turned with a reluctant, metallic groan, and for a moment, I stood on the threshold, afraid of what I might find. The air inside was still and smelled of paper and something faintly floral, like dried lavender. I reached for the light switch and then I froze. It wasn't an archive. It wasn't dusty models or rolled-up blueprints. It was a shrine to a life I had never known. I took a slow step inside. The warm light from a Tiffany lamp cast a soft glow over the room. The walls were covered, completely covered, in photographs, sketches, and handwritten notes. On one wall, dozens of photos were pinned in a careful, loving collage. Every single one had Julian in it, but not the Julian I knew. In these pictures, he wasn't in his usual crisp linen shirts and tailored trousers. He was in worn jeans, soft t-shirts, his hair tousled by the wind. His face was different, softer, more open. His posture wasn't as guarded. And in almost every photo, he was standing beside a woman. The same woman. She was beautiful, with a cascade of dark, curly hair and eyes that sparkled with an intelligent fire. They were close, so close. Her hand on his arm, his head tilted toward hers, a smile on his face I hadn't seen in years, a smile of pure, unburdened joy. In one photo, they were laughing on a beach in Portugal. In another, they were bundled up in a snowy cabin, mugs of what looked like hot chocolate in their hands. There were dates handwritten on the backs. 10 years ago. 6. 4. One from just a few months ago, July 2024. That one stopped my breath. On that day, I was at home, making his favorite seafood paella, waiting for him to return from a site visit. And now, I was looking at a photograph of him sitting beside this woman and a young man in his early 20s. The three of them were smiling, a comfortable, easy radiance binding them together. A family. There was a name scribbled faintly on the back in Julian's elegant script. Serafina and Kale. Lisbon, 2024. My knees felt weak. I reached for the antique writing desk in the center of the room to steady myself. That's when I saw the papers. Files stacked neatly. Bank transfers, corporate records for a company called Oceanic Trust Partners, letters from foreign banks. And in one slim leather-bound folder, a medical report. My eyes scanned the header, Maritime Cardiology Center. It was dated less than 2 months ago. Julian's full name was at the top, followed by a diagnosis I could barely pronounce. Arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy. Advanced stage. High risk of sudden cardiac arrest. He knew. He knew he was dying. He knew. And instead of talking to me, instead of preparing me, instead of even hinting at the truth, he had spent his last days documenting this other life. With another woman. Another family. Because that's what the young man in the photo had to be. Their son. My stomach twisted into a knot of ice and fire. 12 years. 12 years I stood by him, loved him, built my world around him. The man I had mourned on that windy bluff wasn't my husband. Not really. He was a stranger. A stranger who had looked me in the eye the night before he took his boat out, handed me a small, velvet box with an antique silver locket inside, kissed my cheek, and said, "For you, Alara. You're my safe harbor." I staggered back toward the door. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to do with this? Who was I know? A widow? Yes. But of whom? That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the cobblestones outside. Soft, hesitant. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. Standing in the open doorway was the young man from the photograph. Same dark, wavy hair. Same strong jawline. Same intense, searching eyes. His voice was calm when he spoke, but my pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out his first words. "Alara Hayes?" he asked. I didn't answer. "I thought you might come here," he continued, stepping inside slowly. "I'm Kale. Kale de Oliveira." He paused, his gaze both kind and direct. "Julian was my father." And just like that, the floor disappeared from beneath my feet. I don't remember what I said first. Perhaps nothing. I think I just stood there, my hands gripping the back of a velvet armchair as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. Kale moved with a quiet grace, his presence cautious, as though he understood he was treading on the fragile ruins of my life. I stared at him, searching his face. There was no denying it. The way he held his head, the deep-set eyes, they were Julian's. You're really his son?" I finally managed to whisper. "Yes," Kale replied, his voice gentle but firm. "And I am so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. How long did you know about me?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. My whole life, he said, with no trace of malice, only a deep-seated sadness. He didn't tell me much. Only that he was married, that you didn't know. He kept us very separate. My mother, Serafina, she respected that. She never wanted to interfere. His face clouded over. But after she passed away last year, things became complicated. Passed away. So she was gone too. Another ghost in this house of secrets. I sank into the armchair, my legs no longer able to support me. Why are you here? Today? Cale reached into a worn leather satchel and pulled out a folded document, the paper soft with age. He held it out to me. I hesitated before taking it. It's a draft of a will, he said. Unfinished. Unofficial. My father gave it to me a few weeks before he died. He said the official will would go to you, but this was for me. Just in case. I unfolded the paper. There it was, Julian's distinctive handwriting, the elegant, slanted script I knew from birthday cards and love notes. It wasn't notarized, just a few scribbled lines dividing his assets. There was a mention of Cale, a reference to Oceanic Trust Partners, and one more thing, access to remaining documents in office vault. Code linked to personal item gifted to E. I froze. A personal item gifted to me. The locket. The antique silver locket he had given me just 2 nights before he died. It wasn't just a gift. It was a key. I touched my collarbone instinctively, though I wasn't wearing it. I had left it at home, tucked inside its velvet box, because the weight of it felt too heavy to bear. Now it felt infinitely heavier. What is Oceanic Trust Partners? I asked, my eyes still fixed on the paper. Cale took a slow breath. One of his private firms. Not public. He used it to move money, mostly overseas. After my mother died, I started looking into it. There were transfers I couldn't trace, offshore accounts he'd set up. I think he was trying to secure something. For you, for me. For all of us. My mouth was dry. Why? Because he knew his time was running out, Cale said quietly. And because he didn't trust the people he was in business with. I looked up at him, my mind racing. What people? Cale's expression darkened. He never gave me names. He only said that if something happened to him, someone would come looking. For the records, for leverage. For what he left behind. I leaned back in the chair, my thoughts spiraling. A second will, a secret company, a locket that held a code, and the man I had loved for 12 years, who had meticulously constructed an entire world I was never meant to see. You're saying there's more? I asked. That all of this, the studio, the files, the photos, it's just the beginning? Cale nodded. I think he left a map. Not just of his secrets, but of how to protect ourselves from them. I stood slowly, my legs still unsteady, and looked around the room one last time. It no longer felt like a shrine to a lost love. It felt like an evidence room. And a warning. I need to go home, I said, my voice finding a sliver of strength. I need that locket. Can I come with you? Cale asked. If you'll let me. I paused, studying the face of this stranger who shared my husband's blood. Then I nodded. Because whether I wanted it or not, this was our story now, and we were the only 2 people who could read the map he'd left behind. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. My house, once a sanctuary, now felt like the scene of a crime. I needed the clear, unwavering logic of my best friend. So I called Maya. Within 20 minutes, I was on her familiar, overstuffed sofa, my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea I wasn't drinking. The silver locket sat on the reclaimed wood coffee table between us, looking both innocent and sinister. Maya didn't ask questions. She never did. Not until I was ready. And when I finally unspooled the whole tangled story, the studio, Serafina, Cale, the will, she didn't say, I always thought there was something distant about him. She just whispered, "Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry," and reached for my hand. But I wasn't ready to crumble. The grief had been replaced by a cold, sharp-edged anger. I needed answers. I needed someone to blame. So I drove to Lena's. Her condo was in a new waterfront development, all glass and steel, a place she couldn't possibly afford on a gallery assistant's salary. As the elevator ascended, I felt my anger rising with it. She opened the door barefoot, wearing a silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled. "Well, if it isn't my grieving sister," she said with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Come to talk about the inheritance?" "Cut the act, Lena," I said, my voice tight. "We need to talk." I pushed past her into the living room. My eyes immediately landed on a framed photograph on her bookshelf. It was Lena and Julian, clinking champagne glasses on a sailboat, the sun setting behind them. The date stamp in the corner made my stomach clench. 2 years ago. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, pointing at the frame. Lena sauntered over, taking a long sip of her wine. "Oh, that? A client's boat party. You had that awful flu, remember? You told him to go without you. Julian insisted I join him, so he wouldn't be alone." She said it so casually, as if sharing champagne with my husband while I was homesick was the most normal thing in the world. "We always got along so well," she added with a pointed look. I turned to face her. "How well exactly?" Her smirk wavered. "I know about Serafina," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know about Kale. I know about the studio, the secret company the other will. I know everything. So if there's more, you're going to tell me. Now." Lena's eyes narrowed. She walked over to her sleek bar cart, refilled her glass, and turned back to me. "Fine," she said, her voice dropping. "You want the truth?" She set her glass down and placed a hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My mind simply refused to process the words. 10 weeks, she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I found out the week before he died. He knew. He said he would take care of us. He was going to leave her, you know. Serafina." I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching a scene from a terrible play. "You were seeing him, even after Serafina died?" Lena gave a small, defiant shrug. "She was never meant to be permanent. I was always the one here. I was the one who stayed." The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying sound. The loan that wasn't a loan. The expensive condo. The secret smiles. "You slept with my husband," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. Lena's face hardened. "Don't act so sanctimonious, Alara. You had your perfect little life, your perfect little house, your perfect little dinners at 7 o'clock. Meanwhile, I was barely making rent, listening to Mom go on and on about her brilliant, successful daughter and her other daughter. Then Julian started showing up. Offering help. Listening. She looked up at me, her eyes glinting with a strange mix of triumph and pain. "You were his routine, Ellie. I was his escape." The slap was a sound before it was a feeling. My hand stung. Lena's head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming on her cheek. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just touched her face and gave a slow, cold smile. "There she is," she said softly. "The real Alara. Not the placid, perfect wife. The woman who just found out she's been living a lie." I stumbled back, breathing hard, my hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because you never would have believed me," she said. "You always saw me as the jealous little sister. And maybe I was. But this wasn't about you. This was about me finally getting something for myself." I shook my head, a wave of nausea washing over me. "You didn't just take something. You destroyed everything." She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Say what you want. But this baby," she placed her hand back on her stomach, "is your family. Whether you like it or not." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to shatter the champagne glasses, to rewind time itself. But instead, a strange clarity pierced through the rage. I looked at her, at the lie she was nurturing, and made a decision. "I'll honor what Julian left in his will," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Not for you. For the baby. Because they didn't ask for any of this." Lena blinked, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You mean that?" "I don't know what I mean," I whispered. "But I know this. I need to leave." I walked to the door, my shoes crunching on nothing, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I didn't look back. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't bear the 4 walls that had witnessed my blissful ignorance. I returned to Maya's, clutching the silver locket so tightly its edges dug into my skin. She took one look at my face, her own etched with worry, and simply opened the door wider. "You need sleep," she said. But sleep was a distant country I couldn't find my way to. The next morning, Kale picked me up. Maya insisted on coming along. "You are not walking into your dead husband's secret vault without backup," she declared, grabbing her coat. Julian's office was in a sleek high-rise downtown, a place he always called his satellite space. Somewhere to take private meetings. I had never set foot inside. But Kale had a key card. "I'm listed as a partner on the lease," he explained as we swiped through security. The receptionist gave a polite, disinterested nod. Julian had built a life so compartmentalized that his son and his wife walking in together raised no alarms. The elevator ride to the 28th floor felt like an ascent into another world. The office was all glass and chrome, cold and minimalist. There was no trace of warmth, not a single photo of me, no personal trinkets. Just sleek surfaces, gray walls, and a faint, unfamiliar scent of sandalwood. "There," Kale pointed to a large, abstract painting of a stormy sea behind the desk. "The safe is behind that." I reached into my bag and pulled out the locket. My fingers fumbled with the tiny clasp. It didn't just open. I had to twist the filigree frame. With a soft click, the front panel popped open. It wasn't a space for a photo. Instead, etched onto the silver backing plate was a sequence of numbers. Kale took the locket, his fingers surprisingly steady, and typed the code into a nearly invisible keypad beside the painting. A low beep, then a soft whirring sound. The painting swung outward, revealing a heavy steel door. It opened. Inside were stacks of documents, a sleek black flash drive, a small, hand-carved wooden box, and a single silver key attached to a tag that read, "Port Blossom Mutual Trust, Box 713. Kale pulled out the documents. "Contracts, wire transfers, financial statements. Some of these are shell corporations," he murmured, his brow furrowed. He wasn't just hiding money. He was washing it. I picked up the flash drive, but didn't dare plug it in. Not yet. My hand went to the small wooden box. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark blue velvet, was a ring. A simple, elegant gold band with a single, perfect pearl. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't for me. Inside the band, an inscription, Semper, S, always, S, for Serafina. "Oh, Ilara," Maya whispered beside me, her voice thick with emotion. Kale looked away, his jaw tight. "He bought her a ring," I said, my voice hollow. "He was going to marry her. Or maybe he already had." I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't cry. There, in the cold, sterile silence of my dead husband's secret office, I finally grasped the truth I hadn't dared to name. He had loved her. He might have loved me, too, in his own fractured way, as a habit, as a comfort. But Serafina, she had the real man. The one who smiled in photographs and dreamed of a life in Lisbon. The rest of it, the rest of me, was a performance. A well-rehearsed play with dinners at 7, wildflowers on Saturdays, and a safe full of secrets. Then Kale handed me a folded letter. My name was on the front in Julian's hand. I unfolded it with numb fingers. "Ilara, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I am sorry." Those words are not enough, I know. I never had the courage to tell you the truth, to say out loud what I should have said years ago. I was selfish. I built 2 lives because I was too weak to give up either one. And in the end, it cost everyone everything. I did love you. I know that sounds empty now. Maybe it always was. But I did, in the only way I knew how. I wanted you to have peace, to be safe. That's why I left you the papers, the access, the truth. Use them as you see fit. Burn them, bury them, or bring it all down. It is your choice now. Forgive me if you can. If not, I understand. Julian. I stared at the page until the words blurred. I passed it to Maya. She read it silently, her lips a thin line, then handed it to Kale. He read it, his expression unreadable. None of us spoke. What was there to say? The man we had all thought we knew had shattered into 1,000 pieces. And now it was up to us to decide what to do with the shards. We left the office in a fog of shared silence. The kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from the utter exhaustion of too many revelations. Maya drove. Cale sat beside me in the back seat. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of Port Blossom transform into a foreign landscape. My dead husband had lived a life I had never touched. Now, we were holding its explosive core in our hands, and we had no idea who else was watching. That night, as I lay on Maya's pull-out sofa, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Alara Hayes, a man's voice said, smooth as polished granite. Yes, I answered, my body tensing. My name is Marcus Thorne. I was a business associate of your husband's. My stomach plunged. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, he said, his voice calm, chillingly so. The documents from his safe. Some of them concern certain joint ventures. I suggest we meet. I'm not meeting anyone. You will, he said, a hint of steel beneath the silk. Because the other people Julian worked with are not as polite as I am. They don't ask. He hung up. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. In the morning, I told Cale. His jaw clenched. He contacted me, too, he admitted. But there's more. Last night, someone else called. He handed me a slip of paper with a name written on it, Elias Vance. He claims he's the original source of the funds Julian was moving. He said if we don't return everything by the end of the week, there will be consequences. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't have to. Cale held up the silver key from the safe. We still have the deposit box, he said. Whatever's inside might give us some answers. But do we really want to open another one of his boxes? I asked, my voice trembling. What if all it does is pull us in deeper? Maya, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, came and sat beside me. Then at least you'll know, she said gently. The not knowing, Ellie. That's what's killing you. She was right. So we made a plan. First, the bank. Then, we needed to find someone who could help us understand the game we were now a part of. Julian had to have had a failsafe, a contact, someone outside the circle of corruption. That's when Cale's eyes lit up with a flicker of memory. There's a name my mother mentioned once, he said. Arthur Finch. An old professor of my father's from university. She said he was the only one who ever told Julian the truth, even when he didn't want to hear it. Do you know where he is? I think so, Cale said. Mom kept his address in a box of emergency contacts. He lives in Oak Haven, up the coast. So we drove. The tower trip was made in a strange, companionable silence, the rain streaking down the windshield like tears. Oak Haven greeted us with ancient oak trees draped in moss, and the kind of profound stillness that only old towns possess. Arthur Finch lived in a tall, ivy-covered brick house that looked as if it had been pulled from a forgotten novel. An elderly man with kind, crinkling eyes and a shock of white hair opened the door. You're Alara, he said, without a hint of surprise. He then looked at Cale. And you must be his son. You knew we'd come? I asked, astonished. He nodded gravely. Julian said, if it all comes apart at the seams, they'll find their way to you. He stepped back. Come in. The house smelled of old paper, leather, and pipe tobacco. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling in every room. He motioned for us to sit, then disappeared into his study. He returned with a sealed manila envelope. He left this with me 5 years ago, Arthur said. My instructions were to open it only if the two of you showed up here. Together. I looked at Cale. He gave a slight nod. I broke the seal. Inside was a short, handwritten letter and a second will. This one was different. It was formally drafted, signed, and notarized. And it named the unborn child of Lena Hayes. 25% of Julian's designated private savings offshore, unspecified, was to be held in trust until the child turned 21. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had planned for everything, even for her. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just sorting through a dead man's secrets. We were standing at the epicenter of a storm he had meticulously designed. And it was now on us to find a way to survive it. I stared at the formal will again, at the precise legal language, unborn child of Lena Hayes, 25% to be held in trust. It wasn't the money that stunned me, but the cold, calculating foresight. Even from the grave, Julian was controlling the narrative. Why would he name the baby, but not Lena? I asked Arthur, my voice a whisper. Because he trusted the child's future, Arthur said gently, but not the mother's intentions. Cale shifted in his chair. This changes things. It means Lena has no legal claim to that money directly. And if she tries to fight it? I asked. Arthur nodded toward the black flash drive I was still clutching in my bag. Then use that. From what Julian told me, it contains a detailed ledger. Every transfer, every partner, every corner they cut to build their empire. If they push you, you push back. Maya, who had been silent until now, let out a long breath. You have leverage, Ellie. For the first time since Julian died, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the deceived wife left with the wreckage. I felt like the person holding the map, the key, and the final word. That was a form of power I had never known. Cale leaned forward, his eyes intense. Elara, I think it's time we stop reacting. We need to make a move before Thorn or Vance does. I nodded slowly. We go to the bank. We drove back to Port Blossom before noon. The Port Blossom Mutual Trust Building was a discreet, gray stone edifice nestled between a maritime law firm and a historic inn. Maya waited in the car. Just text if it gets weird, she said. And if they give you trouble, cry. No one says no to a crying widow at a bank. Cale almost smiled at that. I didn't. Inside, the vault manager, a man with a meticulously trimmed mustache, examined the silver key, checked my ID, and raised a curious eyebrow. It's been a very long time since this box was accessed, he remarked. Registered under a corporate name, Oceanic Trust Partners. He led us down into the basement, through layers of steel and concrete. The air grew cold, the silence profound. Finally, he gestured to a small, gleaming metal door. He handed me a pair of white cotton gloves. Standard procedure. I'll leave you to it. The heavy door clicked shut behind us. My fingers hovered over the lock. Ready? Cale asked. No, I said. But I turned the key anyway. The box slid out with a smooth, heavy sound. Inside, there was no cash, no passports, no untraceable bearer bonds. Just one manila folder and a single photograph. The photo was of Julian, Cale's mother Serafina, Marcus Thorn, and Elias Vance. They were standing on the deck of a yacht, champagne flutes in hand, smiling and laughing under a Mediterranean sun. They weren't just business associates, I breathed. They were partners. All of them. Cale opened the folder. It was filled with signed agreements, shell company registrations, and a series of documents in a separate, red-tabbed section labeled Insurance Policy, Vance/Thorn. It was a dossier of their own misdeeds, tax evasion, bribery, fraud. It wasn't just leverage, it was a loaded gun. Julian kept proof, I whispered. Of everything. In that moment, I understood. He hadn't just left me a mess. He'd left me a weapon. Now, it was my choice who to aim it at. We didn't go home. We went to a lawyer. His name was Mr. Davies, a quiet, sharp-eyed man who had handled my parents' estate years ago. I told him everything, the documents, the threats, the offshore accounts. I left out the personal betrayals, they weren't relevant here. He listened without interruption, his face impassive. Do you want to press charges? He asked when I was done. No, I said. I want insurance. He gave a slight, approving nod. Then we'll copy everything. Digitally and physically. We'll store backups in 3 secure locations. One here, one with you, and one with a neutral third party. I know just the person, Maya said from the chair beside me, her expression grimly determined. We spent the afternoon scanning. Julian's records were impeccable. Names, dates, wire logs, a complete paper trail of a criminal enterprise. With him gone, Thorn and Vance must have thought the evidence had gone with him. They were wrong. By the end of the day, Mr. Davies had drafted a simple, non-threatening letter. I added one line to the bottom in my own handwriting. Try me. H. We sent copies to Marcus Thorn and Elias Vance via courier. Thorn called within the hour. You think you're clever? He hissed. You're in over your head, little lady. No, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. You are. Because my lawyer has copies of everything. The next call I make is to the SEC. After that, Interpol. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then a dry, humorless laugh. All right. What do you want? Nothing, I said. I want you to go away. No calls, no threats. You leave me and everyone connected to me alone. If you don't, the entire folder goes public. Every signature, every account number. You don't want that kind of trouble. I already have that kind of trouble, I said, and the truth of it resonated in my own ears. The difference is, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I hung up. 2 hours later, Elias Vance called. His tone was different, smooth, conciliatory. Alara, he began, as if we were old friends. I believe we've started off on the wrong foot. There is no foot, I said. There's just your name on a dozen illegal transfers. He chuckled softly. All a matter of interpretation, of course. I let the silence stretch, a tactic I'd learned from Julian. Then I said, here's the thing, Mr. Vance. I have no reputation left to protect. No company to salvage. I have nothing left of the life I knew. And that should make you very, very nervous. That finally shut him up. I ended the call. That night, Cale and I sat on Maya's porch. The flash drive was in his pocket. A copy of the folder was buried deep in a planter box full of petunias. It felt paranoid, but when you've been lied to by the person you trusted most in the world, paranoia starts to feel like common sense. I didn't know he was capable of all this, Cale said quietly, staring out at the darkening sky. My mother, she always said he was a complicated man. But I thought she meant he was sad, not this. He was both, I said. And maybe more. I looked up at the first stars pricking the twilight, cold and distant. We're not done yet. There's one more thing we haven't opened. Cale frowned. What? The flash drive. The flash drive was small, black, and unmarked. It sat on the table for 2 days. 2 days of me walking past it, my stomach churning. 2 days of me gathering the courage to face whatever final truth Julian had left for me. I needed to be ready, not just for the information, but for the person I would be after knowing it. Finally, on the 3rd morning, I was ready. Cale sat beside me on the sofa. Maya brought tea, her silent presence a source of strength. No one spoke as I slid the drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared on the screen, for Alara. Inside, one video file, dated just 10 days before Julian's death. My hand trembled as I clicked play. The screen flickered to life. It was Julian, but not a version I recognized. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed with an exhaustion that went deeper than sleeplessness. He was in the studio, the lamplight casting long shadows across his face. Alara, he began, his voice raspy. If you're watching this, it means I ran out of time. He sighed, a heavy, ragged sound, and rubbed his face with both hands. There's no easy way to say any of this. You were never the one I was hiding things from. You were the one I was trying to protect them for. But I waited too long. He paused, gathering himself. There's someone you need to be careful of. Someone you trust. My heart seemed to slow down, each beat a heavy thud in the stillness of the room. He looked directly into the camera lens, his gaze piercing. It's Lena. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just an affair, he continued, his voice cracking. It wasn't that simple. She was strategic. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. The night I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I was going to try to fix things, she changed. She threatened to go public with the accounts, with Thorne and Vance, with everything I had buried to keep our life intact. He leaned closer, his eyes haunted. And I think she had something to do with Serafina's death. My hand flew to my mouth. Maya gasped. Cale sat rigid as stone. I can't prove it, Julian said, his voice dropping to a tormented whisper. But the timing, it was too perfect. Serafina had just told me she was done waiting. She'd booked a one-way flight to Lisbon for her and Cale. She was leaving for good. Then, the car crash. Single vehicle, no witnesses. Brake failure, the police report said. But she'd had the car serviced the day before. He looked into the camera, his eyes filled with a desperate, helpless guilt. Lena knew Serafina was leaving. She knew she was pregnant. It gave her the ultimate leverage. He looked away, then back, his expression broken. I was weak, Ellie. I was a coward. But you're not. If you want to walk away from all of this, do it. Take what's yours and leave it all behind. But if you decide to fight, don't do it alone. The screen went black. I sat there, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity. He knew. He suspected the depths of my sister's darkness, and his final act wasn't one of courage, but of damage control. He had armed me, but he hadn't saved me. He had simply handed me the final, most poisonous truth and left me to decide what to do with it. Lena didn't know I'd seen the video. Not when I invited her to brunch at a quiet cafe by the water. Not when I greeted her with a calm smile. She wore a pale yellow dress that accentuated her growing belly. He kicks whenever I eat scones, she said with a proprietary little laugh, patting her stomach. I smiled back, a cool, placid smile that didn't reach my eyes. We sat at a small table on the patio, the scent of sea salt and baked bread in the air. I'm glad you reached out, Lena said, folding her hands neatly on the table. I was worried you were still angry. Why would I be angry? I asked softly. Because my husband was sleeping with my sister? Or because he was planning to leave you? Lena's smile faltered. That was the first crack in her composure. She shifted in her seat. Alara, that's not fair. Julian was confused. He loved you. No, I interrupted, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel she had never heard before. He didn't love me enough. But he feared you. Her face went still. I placed the black flash drive on the table between us. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. I know about the blackmail, I said. I know he was trying to get away. And I know about Serafina's accident. She didn't blink. You can't prove a thing. You're right, I replied. I can't. And I'm not going to try. She frowned, confused. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I'm not going to court. I'm not going to the police. I'm not going to fight for some broken version of justice. I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time, I felt no anger, no grief. Only a vast, empty peace. I'm going to walk away. And I'm going to leave you here with everything you thought you wanted. The money, the child, the memory of a man who was terrified of you. I hope it keeps you warm at night. You think that scares me? She hissed, her composure finally shattering. No, I said. But living with yourself will. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her alone at the table with the truth sitting between us. I didn't look back. Later that afternoon, I met with Mr. Davies one last time. I gave him the flash drive, a signed affidavit detailing my suspicions, and one final instruction. If anything ever happens to me, or to Kale, this goes to every major news outlet in the country. Then I went home. To the house I once shared with Julian. It was quiet. Still. I walked through each room, a ghost in my own life. I opened the closets filled with his clothes and mine, a life neatly folded and hung side by side. I packed one suitcase. Just my things. I left the rest. I locked the front door behind me and dropped the key into the mailbox. I never went back to the studio. That world belonged to ghosts. 1 week later, I stood on a ferry, the salty wind whipping through my hair, watching the coastline of Port Blossom recede until it was just a faint line on the horizon. I was heading west, towards a small, quiet island I'd seen on a map, a place of tall trees and rugged shores. I had a new name on a lease for a tiny cottage overlooking the ocean. No secrets, no safes, no more lies. I didn't know who I was yet, not completely. But for the first time in a long time, I knew who I wasn't. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a victim. I was Alara. Not the woman defined by his secrets, but the one who found her own truth in the wreckage. And that was enough. That was everything.